But what we then get here is begin to see the global patterns of those who control and those who are affected by the control. And so the point then becomes now we start to look at, he begins to build a case of the kind of crimes that were committed by the plutocracies against the peoples. And in this case, the major crime was the mass murder that was committed, predicated against hundreds of thousands of Japanese peoples, but was predicated basically on false flag operations like that of the Gulf of Tonkin,
the Reichstag with Hitler.
The Reichstag of Hitler, and going back to the Mexican JFK, and but the Mexican
1898 there was the sinking of the USS Maine.
Yeah.
In Cuba.
Right. So he gives the whole analysis. He also talks about the Operation Northwoods and how the governments and those that are in control have contrived false flag operations to justify an incursion, to kill the populations, to destabilize the governments, and to seize the resources. It's been a resource war from day one to today. Yeah. Then we start to move along in the book, and we see the progression of those, and again, we're just picking points right now in the book, but then we get to now contemporary times, the whole rise of the industrial state, the whole rise of capitalism and imperialism abroad, and domestically, and the need to expropriate more resources, and the kind of connivery and the kind of really malicious, evil policies and operations that are conducted by the intelligence agencies, the CIA, and other international agencies like the British SAS, the ISI, and the Mossad agents, and those that are responsible, man, for planning the destabilization of governments to seize those resources, and just how evil can these particular individuals get, which brought us in the book to the point of the possibility that the United States was also involved, right, in orchestrating the 9/11 bring down of the Twin Towers. Yeah. And so much information has been released since September of 2001 to clearly show us that those towers were brought down by explosives, to clearly show us that all these major operations were in the three towers, including the World Trade Center number 7, which was not hit by a plane, but it was brought down in its own footprints. Yeah. And so then there's ample evidence to show that there were major corporations like AIG, like Marsh and McClellan, and other corporations that had benefited billions of dollars in profits, which is also clearly defined in Peter Scott Dale's latest book called The American War Machine, and the whole connection of the CIA and intelligence and the drug operations internationally from the time of the Vietnam War till today. The reality now shows us that we're living in an era where the evolution of the whole question of the capitalist state, the imperialist state, and its global intent, right, is leading us to a possible world conflagration, a possible nuclear war. Holocaust, and at that point, a Holocaust internationally, and at that point, Professor Hall poses the question, where and how do we intervene? Where do we find peace? Internationally, as individuals, environmentally, politically, geographically, the geopolitical realities for obtaining peace. For the world, the human family, for peace and prosperity worldwide.
So you suggested that this might be a candidate for some kind of peace prize?
I have. After I finished reading this book, it was my ultimate inclination, and there's so much more information in this book that it is a must read. And in my mind, my initial reaction was, this book must be presented to every single person at the United Nations level and everybody in the UN Security Council, every member of the UN General Assembly, every worker, every institution and organization within that UN body, have got to take this book and read it. I'm even talking with my lawyer from the Attica Rebellion in 1971. One of my lawyers is the former U.S. Attorney General of the United States, Ramsey Clark. And we've already agreed, as well as locally here, speaking with a group of a very great organization called the Consortium for Peace here in Calgary.
Yeah.
And this book has been, and I've asked them to potentially consider this book to be nominated for a Peace Award out of Calgary. But more so, I'm trying to initiate a drive that if we as anti-war activists are truly involved in trying to set the reality for worldwide peace and to change this particular system that seems to have no brakes as to where it's going. There's no way to stop the inevitable destructive forces unless something intervenes to create a window of opportunity, a moment of clarity on the need for international worldwide peace.
Okay.
And I am trying to initiate a campaign in my own way with all of the connections that I've had over the years to nominate this book for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay.
And to be read by leaders worldwide and to intervene, to cause for some form of intervention on behalf of the people to begin to dismantle this war machine. And I think it is so totally necessary to understand that the gravest danger to us right now as a people, post 9/11, which I will never stop saying I believe was an inside job. And the reason I'm saying that it was orchestrated and manufactured by the Bush-Cheney neoconservative cabal was to serve the interest of what was called in their strategy, put together, it was called the Full Spectrum Domination.
And the Project for the New American
Century. And the Project for a New American Century that basically stated that in order to justify the increase of the military budget to benefit billions of dollars for Lockheed Martin, Northwood, and other major military arms dealers and insurance companies, was to manufacture an incident that would be of a Pearl Harbor, like
a new Pearl Harbor.
A new Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Now I'm saying, post 9/11, when they did away with the communist threat, post 9/11 introduced the terrorist, so-called terrorist threat. And what basically we were told by Dick Cheney was that 9/11 has caused for this global war on terror, which will never end in our lifetime. 100-year wars that will never end in our lifetime. Yeah. And now we have to ask ourselves, those of us that have children, those of us that have sons and daughters that are coming up in this world, 100 years of warfare with no end in sight does not equal peace on anybody's terms. No. So how can we stop this international aggression by the cabal that controls Wall Street, the cabal that controls the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank? How do we stop these people that are behind the Federal Reserve? How do we stop them from orchestrating these bogus wars for oil, gas, and pipelines, whether it's in Asia or Africa or in Pakistan, Afghanistan, or if it's the endgame pipeline running from Alberta and the oil tar sands of Alberta to the coast north the coast of British Columbia? Unless we can expose that 9/11 was in fact an inside job, we will never be able to stop this so-called endless war on terror.
Yeah, I think one reason that Professor Hall's book could be of use, like you say, and should be read by world leaders, is that it provides historical context. Because if we want to decide where we're going to go, we have to know where we've come from in life, you know. And in Cuba they say education is liberation, and I think what Professor Hall does is rather than like Peter Dale Scott situate 9/11 and the nefarious actions of the CIA, the Mossad, MI5, MI6 within a small context. He provides a historical context to explain to us why it is that we see the colonial methodology of the United States Empire being so surreptitious, so unlawful, so deceitful. And unlike other modes of colonization who were kind of more honest and said, well, we are the colonial master and this is what we're doing, the United States kind of denies that it's an empire. Professor Hall aptly calls it an imperial republic because it used the rhetoric of anti-imperialism, but as we see in the Declaration of Independence, it was quite the opposite. So I think Professor Hall's book could be of great utility to world leaders who are interested in peace, because it maps out the history of genocide, the genesis of international law, and which he traces back to 1763. And I think to understand 9/11, and it is incidentally the third peer-reviewed book that shows genuine skepticism towards the official conspiracy theory propagated by the US government within hours of the disputed events of 9/11. I think he deals with 9/11 very well and very professionally, and situates it within this broad historical context, which is so useful, I believe. And yeah, like Splitting the Sky says, he defines things like false flag terrorism. I mean, certain things are just denied, or professors blind themselves to the existence of the very notion of a government conducting terrorist attacks in order to frame those it would like to do war against. And you know, the idea of false flag terrorism even being acknowledged as a governmental policy is quite rare. And so there's many unique aspects of the book, and as I say, it situates the war on terror, the global war on terror, within 500 years of history, and I think that from that respect, it's very important for professors, world leaders, lawyers, doctors, and ordinary citizens to embrace this text and attempt to grapple with the unique revisionism to some extent that we see in the book.
And I would say in closing, this book here can either be a beacon of light for world peace. This book can create debate to arrest the madness that we're all caught up in. We're caught in a current of national and self-destruction. Or it can be a beacon of light. Or if we do nothing and we do not try to arrest the lawlessness of those who are in control, who have been in control for hundreds of years, most predominantly from 1913, if we don't begin to arrest it, then any chance for the rule of law and peace will be obliterated. Our duty to find a way out for the